Welcome back to another episode of the Wrinkly Brain Podcast. This is a EDH-focused podcast where we like to goof, gap, and talk about the Commander format. I'm your host, Ethan. Today, I am joined by my other hosts, Cameron and Jason. Go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Howdy, y'all. It's Cameron. Good to be back.
Hey guys, it's Jason. Glad to be here.
Well, aren't you guys just so cute? Before we hop into all of this, I really just want to talk about something that's really excited to happen to us. If you guys haven't seen some of our latest gameplay videos and you've been away for 2 weeks for some reason, we're now partnered with Dragon Shield. What?
We did it!
Boys, we made it!
Very exciting.
We're super excited about that, and it's just blowing my mind personally that we're getting this opportunity.
We've been using their products ever since we played. Like, I remember my first pack of sleeves was on clearance at my LGS. They had a clearance aisle, and it was some it wasn't even matte. It was classic like blacks and greens. And I was like, oh, okay, I need these to go over the cardboard. That doesn't make sense. This is before I realized cardboard equated to money.
I got copper and blue from that same clearance section.
Let me just say, love being recognized by Big Dragon Daddy. It's fantastic. With this, though, I demand my official recognition as internet micro celebrity. I think we get a plaque for that or something.
Maybe I'll put you out if you want.
Maybe a gold star.
Gold star. Oh, can I put it on my wall?
Yes, of course. I'll go on Amazon later and order you one, ship it to your door in 2 days.
Do you have a fax machine? I can fax you one. And you can
Wish I did, honestly.
Does your cure not have the instant messaging feature? Mine does.
Yeah, let me give it my smart fridge to message your smart fridge.
Oh, yeah. It's 2022. Anything's possible. Like getting partnered with Dragon Shield. So I just personally thank you again to Dragon Shield, and I hope this relationship continues and blossoms into something great. We're really excited moving forward. But I guess we'll just move on to the next topic now. What we want to focus on today is budget deck building. A few weeks back, we posted a budget deck video, which we haven't done in a while. And we're not really great. It was Sir Konrad versus Tayam versus Goro-Goro versus Nymris. Yeah, sorry, I had to block that deck out of my mind. It was a little too real.
It's fine. We lost that game. It doesn't exist. It's in the ether.
We only have one footage from that recording session. We recorded 3 games, 1 CDH and 2 budget. The CDH game was ended in 20 minutes because Chandler comboed out really quickly, and it was just like, okay, we want to focus on the budget, so we moved past. We're going to go back to it. And then the budget decks took quite a while. We lost the first game of footage. It was it was a rough game. Cameron said, "You're going to watch me play Magic."
What was rough about it? You didn't have to watch me play Magic. My turns didn't take that long.
I'm sorry. Nymris player decided to play on everyone else's turns. He turned every turn into a Cameron turn.
I didn't take that long. I just countered it and moved on.
There was a little bit of salt starting to rile up. I'm not gonna lie. Not from me. He totally didn't do Siphon Insight on me, found my Mana Tithe, and then Mana Tithe me with my own Mana Tithe.
Mana Tithe you with your own Mana Tithe.
That was a last minute include too.
Jason, did you hear about that?
No, this is news to me, and God, I'm so happy.
Siphon Insight, and what's the 2 hybrid white-black, three hybrid white-black pips that cast a white spell, tap target creature.
Deathbringer Liege?
Yes.
Deathbringer Liege.
It was either that or Mana Tithe, and I was like, well, Deathbringer Liege is the correct choice here, but I want to Mana Tithe someone, so screw it. And Ethan just so happened to tap out for something, and I was like, I don't care what it is. There's no way I'm not going to Mana Tithe
someone with
their own Mana Tithe. I got a Nymris trigger off of it, too!
Screw you. I was going to just play Sunsquirt Regent, which you Mana Tithe, but I had 7 mana that turn. And I was going to play the Sunscorch Regent, but I drew on a Finza Kintree Spirit, and I was like, cool, I can double spell and get the bolster trigger. And I got Mana Tithe. I proceeded to stand up, move into Shelby's kitchen, and then sit on the ground and cry for a good minute. And then we got back up and continued the game. And then Cameron, I believe, like the next turn, played Hullbreaker Horror and proceeded to just bounce everyone's threats every turn. And then we realized, hey, the footage isn't working. The camera stopped recording somewhere in all this. We don't know where, so we just scrapped the game.
was gonna win soon. I had Rise from the Tides in hand and a Rune Chanter's Pike, and so my Hullbreaker Horror was like a 17-8 or whatever. We were getting there.
That doesn't matter. The pain you caused me is going to live on forever.
I mean, it makes me laugh. So if that's how it lives on, then that's fine.
Comedy is all about misery, right?
Getting back to the main topic, though, just the fact, like, you're mentioning so many cards that I'm just like, wow, I haven't seen these at commander tables in a long time. Like, I have not seen Runechanter's Pike or Siphon Insight. I mean, I haven't seen Siphon Insight
a
at
new
all.
card.
I'm just happy to see it.
It's a fun card.
Well, Runechanter's Pike, I played in my Octavia deck, which I'm not sure if that video when I played it had Runechanter's Pike. That card's insane, though.
Good card.
Either way, that's over a year since I've seen it.
Has it been that long since Octavia was on the channel?
I think
Been
it was
about
last
that long.
Summer or fall. It's probably like 8 or 9 months.
It's getting there.
Time continues to move forward, and I'm
Tempest
stuck in the past.
Frigate.
As a casual reminder, pandemic years are all the same year. Pandemic
Yes,
years
also-
are all the same year.
This is very true. So now we've talked about budget games and how much fun they can be, Cameron. We want to kind of go into the process of budget deck building because it's very fresh to us. Because even though Jason wasn't present for the games, he helped us build all of our decks because Jason is a lovely individual. So
I also just build the most budget decks casually anyway.
this is very true, and I'm trying to learn a lot from him, and I feel like he's got a lot of good insight on this. And again, it's fresh in our minds. We want to talk about it. So the budget deck building process. How does budget deck building differ from normal deck building?
The immediate thing is you have a budget, right?
You know?
So the most important thing is dictating your rules for your budget. For our video, we opted to do $50 budgets, which most of you guys, I was surprised by how many of you said, "Oh, that was easy to do," because I've getting a good $50 budget is not easy to do. So I was very impressed with how well y'all built your decks, especially given first tries, even with mostly just minor input from me.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's that we built decks for the channel for quite a while. We know how to build them occasionally.
Yeah, it's true. But the first thing is if you're doing a budget deck, there's a lot of restrictions you can choose to impose on yourself if you want to. These are optional and just good guidelines. For example, is the commander part of the budget? For this video, we opted yes. Some people will do budget videos and they don't do that. I do a budget gift exchange every year, and one of my friends really wanted to do Hazezan tomorrow, and he had to try to find a way to get that in a $100 budget.
Ooh,
how much is Hazezan tomorrow?
The normal versions right now are $300.
That might be tough.
A little bit.
Italian heavy play.
I didn't realize your copy.
Wait, how much did he get that Hazezan tomorrow for?
About $70.
$30 rest of the deck.
30.
The rest of the deck was $30. Yes.
Just for context, Hazezan tomorrow is the Sand Warrior, correct? The Sand Warrior creator.
7 mana. He's basically an Avenger of Zendikar, but the dudes don't come until your upkeep.
Do they leave when he leaves?
Yep, he exiles them if he leaves the battlefield.
Okay, neat.
But it's a triggered ability.
Stifle it.
You can.
Or send out the Infinite, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Or just kill Hazezan before the warriors come down.
Yeah,
this is very true. Well, just if he dies before your upkeep, then the warriors come in and there's nothing to lead to exile them. So it's like a fiend. Yeah, fiend. It's like a fiend hunter interaction.
So you mentioned if your commander is part of the budget, there's also other rules we need to think about if we're enacting a budget for our decks. You also need to think about where you're picking your prices from when looking at cards, because you look at something like Card Kingdom, where the cards are generally a little bit more expensive because you're just buying from the one seller, where you can go to TCG Player and compare and contrast different sellers and there's also obviously the different qualities the card is in, their conditions, and different types. So all that lends itself to changing the price of the card.
And with that, another restriction you could do is no cards over $5, right?
Yeah,
that's very much something you could do. That way, it restricts your budget even more. Because some budget decks, I know at least one, in our channel, someone put an Ashnod's Ultra, and that's a $12 card. If you want to really limit yourself, you could restrict pricing based on how much one single card is. That way, you're not trying to fit a super powerful card like Ozlith and $35 worth of just jank to make Ozlith work. We tried that.
We did.
It did not work out well.
It worked fine.
Well, it did not work out fine. It did not make the final cut of that deck.
In any non-budget version, that card is the first card in the deck, probably.
Yeah, Felisa loves Ozolith. It just does not love it on $50 budget.
You did get to fit the Cathar's Crusade in, though, if I recall.
That one we did fit in, and that was only $7.
Yeah,
But again, if we were to do that restriction, that would not be in the deck, which would make that deck even dicier on that budget. I did not think that was a good budget deck. It was rough.
I think we make it do. We can revisit it.
Yeah, maybe in the future. But like something to consider also on price is some cards are surprisingly cheap, right? Like some things you just see like, oh wait, that's only 50 cents, and also some staples are surprisingly expensive. Smothering Tithe is a $45 card now, guys. You really can't fit that on a budget.
Has it always been even? What was it when it first dropped? I remember it even being like $30, even at the beginning. Wasn't it super
like
expensive?
10 or 15 starting out.
Yeah, like $15 at one point. But that was like the week it released.
Let's go back to that timeline.
We all want to go back to when we were 20, Cameron. Stop.
Cool.
Things were happier back then.
Easier. But even with that Smothering Tithe, you think that's one of the big staples. But you also have cards that are pretty innocuous that actually turn out to be more expensive. Like Anguished Unmaking is a great example. It's just solid removal at 3 mana, exiling an on-land permanent, but it's $8. So you're probably not going to want to devote an $8 spot to removal in a $50 budget deck.
Yeah, a lot of auto includes that most people would play just don't get to be in your decks. Lightning Greaves is $8. You really have to consider if a Lightning Greaves is worth it. Avenger of Zendikar at $6. A lot of green decks just default to Avenger of Zendikar being their main threat to win the game, and now you have to sit there and think, do I really want to spend over 10% of my budget on a single card?
Well, even like Mana Rocks now too. Like you as the Mana Rock guy that plays like 15 per deck, Talisman of Progress is like how much now according to Card Kingdom? Like $15?
$15.
Why?
Pain.
Unrelated. It should have been reprinted in the Buckle Up Precon from Kamigawa.
It should have been reprinted in Spirits.
Well, especially in that one, in the Buckle Up, because it's an artifact deck.
It should just be put in any.
Let me just count the ways. You have the Millicent Precon.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You have Buckle Up. And you have the Raynar Precon. All of which could have had it.
In the past year.
Also, just casually mention that we've also had the Galea Precon and the Sephiroth Precon that could have had it. There were plenty of opportunities.
What baffles me is that the Zombies Precon still had the blue-black talisman.
Mm-hmm.
But
and the Prosper Precon had the red-black one too.
The Vampires, I think, had red-black too.
That one's pretty cheap.
Yeah, now that one's dirt cheap. I remember buying it at an LGS near me, but right before it got reprinted for it was like $8, and that's for a 2-mana Mana Rock. So, I mean, even cards like Soul Ring, you have to seriously consider. I know it's the most auto include of all auto includes, right? But it's a $2 card.
Yeah,
Arcane Signet.
Arcane Signet even more so.
Yeah. Both of those. I think you can find the cheapest version of Arcane Signet for $1.
Okay.
But
that's still.
I think the cheapest version of Soul Ring is like $1.25, and most versions you'd find are closer to $2. Felwar Stone is a card that's almost always $2 minimum.
Yep.
And it was more for a while. Just the reprint recently drove it down some.
Yep.
So, and even thinking about good removal, Source of Plowshares is just a staple, right? That's $2. Source of Plowshares is a $2 card now. That is a actual consideration to running the best removal in the game.
Yeah, it sometimes doesn't make the cut.
Mm-hmm.
And it is literally just budget considerations. I know, when you're building your casual decks, for example, sometimes you're just like, all right, I'm not going to go ahead and pick up a $50 card. But if you're just brewing without any concern for budget, you auto include a lot of things. That said, though, one of the great things about doing budget decks is you suddenly learn some cards are dirt cheap and really good.
Cameron, what's your favorite budget card from your Nymris deck?
My favorite budget card from my Nymris deck I built was definitely Mystical Teachings. I don't believe I got to cast it in game, but I know we say tutoring is cringe and all that, but
it is. But continue.
I do think that the stipulation on Mystical Teachings, and it's a 4 mana, so an instant speed diabolic tutor for a specific card, which the restriction of it being an instant or a card with flash, I believe that's the restriction on it.
Correct.
Isn't that bad in a Nymris deck? I can go get Hullbreaker Horror or something.
Yeah.
But
is it
But
also
it's
flashback.
Yeah, you can flash it back for 6 or 7 mana, right?
No.
7
It
mana.
tutors out a card with flashback, I believe. It's either a card instant or a card with flashback, or am I missing?
Flash.
Flash.
It is flash. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
you
sorry.
can get Notion
Flash and
Thief with it.
flashback.
You can get Notion Thief, yeah. I did play
Oh.
Notion Thief.
Guess how I used
that-
it the first time I played with that card.
I definitely would have been tutoring Hullbreaker Horror, because that card is a house.
That card has flash. God.
Yeah!
Yeah.
I argue that it's better than Tidespout Tyrant, but that's another discussion.
One has flash and one costs less mana.
That's the same card. That's the same card that has flash. It costs less mana. It's Hullbreaker Horror.
Yeah, that's
and
a whole
uncounterable.
different.
Uncounterable.
So moving on from Cameron's just diabolic green
is
there.
Great.
So other cards that I'm a big fan of. I like this card even in a non-budget, but Flood of Tears is a fantastic board wipe. It obviously isn't as flexible as like Cyclonic Rift, but being able to get that extra permanent back into play, like you could just cheat in a big permanent, a big beater. You could say, "Cool, I've got a bunch of mana rocks. I'm gonna turn that, bounce everyone else's board, and turn that into a finisher."
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a card you bounce. It can just, as you're saying, like you bounce all your mana rocks and you put in Blightsteel Colossus or something. Like
not in budget, but
not budget, but like
I was gonna say Omniscience is often the go-to, but that's also not a card you're seeing in budget very often. Not unless someone worked really hard.
That's our project later, Jason.
Oh no.
But, another card that is also pretty cheap, thanks to some commander deck reprints, I believe. Unbreakable Formation. That card's like 50 cents, and that is a way to end a game, and it's board wipe protection in a white deck. Like that's a very solid include.
It's a solid
any budget deck.
Yeah, it's not the most impressive card. I'll be real with you. I would rather have a Teferi's Protection, of course, but at the same time, when you're working with that budget, you find those rough equivalents, and you go, "This is good enough." And it also does something else I kind of need it to do. I'm cool with this.
I think a really good comparison to that would be a Chroma's Will. Like, a Chroma's Will is going to be better. It offers the same thing-ish, because it can give double strike, and so it can finish. But, like, I often find myself, not even in non-budget decks, if I'm playing a Sunforger deck, which I'm known to do, it has serious consideration being able to find it off Sunforger and protect my board once. So,
absolutely.
But it's also $7.
Sunforger?
No, Chroma's Will.
Oh, I'm saying that I was more. Yeah. Sorry, I clarify. I'm
Generally
talking about
speaking.
Unbreakable Will or whatever it was.
Unbreakable
Formation. Yeah, I consider that one because it's like I didn't own an Chroma's Will at the time, and that was a really good budget alternative to a Chroma's Will.
Talking about an engine piece that's surprisingly cheap as well. Midnight Reaper being like 50 cents, right?
Yeah.
Like the sack decks in general are not the most expensive, but the sack outlets tend to be expensive. Even the card we were talking previously that Carrion Feeder being $1 makes it a serious consideration to not include in the deck, because it's $1. I could probably find a cheaper sack outlet.
Viserys here. I think
mainly.
But you also need that critical mass, right?
Yes.
You can't play like any altars, because Altar of Dementia, which is probably your best altar to work with, is $9.
$8-9,
yeah.
Phyrexian Altar is like 90.
Yeah.
Why?
Bro.
Ash Nods is like 10 or 15. So your sack outlets are really limited in those aristocrats decks. That's hard to say. So
Cameron, I'm going to clip that later.
Yeah, I know.
Okay,
but I mean, cards like the what is it? Midnight Reaper. I think Grip Haruspex is also a really cheap one. That's really good. It's
like 80 cents.
It's functionally similar.
Yeah,
but and even like if it's not just a value piece, big beaters like Managorger Hydra, I see that in budget decks and non-budget decks alike. It gets big very fast.
Another card for, like we mentioned, sack decks a second ago, because we're just all over the place with this section for some reason. Karmic Guide is stupid cheap thanks to a lot of reprints. If you're trying to go a combo graveyard route, Karmic Guide and Revelark, I think Revelark's like 60 cents. Those are two of the main pieces for those combos. And Viserys is also another card. That combo is very cheap. You just need an outlet for it, which is where it gepts pricey. Zulaport Cutthroat's about $1, and then Blood Artist is $6 or $7, and past that, I couldn't tell you. That's Cameron's fault.
Falcon Wrath Noble's one. There's Bastion of Remembrance. That one also works. That one's really good, and that's not a creature, notably.
But how much is that card though? I think it's
Bastion
actually
of Remembrance.
I think it's like a few dollars, if I'm not mistaken.
There's like $1 and some change.
Falcon Wrath
Granted,
Noble.
it's over $1, so I'm like iffy on it, but also reasonable.
Falcon Wrath Noble is also like 4 mana, so I doubt that one's going to be nearly as expensive as the Blood Artist effects.
Bastion Rumors is $4, guys.
Never mind. We move on from
That's
that
why I was
one.
like, I thought it was more.
Yeah, never mind. We're wrong.
Yeah, Falcon Wrath Noble is about 25 cents.
There you go.
So like that one is a alternative.
There's also Poison Tip Archer, I believe, in black-green that works.
Poison Tip Archer. I'm glad I have TCG Player up on my other monitor. That's about $1. $1.08 for the cheapest market price. And I also got a reprint in the Commander Kaldheim deck, and that's more expensive than the Core 2019.
It's an elf.
It is indeed an elf, so it's going to be a little bit more.
Elf premiums.
Speaking of elves, we like to remove those because those things are good. Let's talk about removal. Chain Reaction is a good budget alternative to like Blasphemous Act because that card's like $5. But Chain Reaction is generally pretty cheap. It's been reprinted in multiple Commander decks. And against Go Wise strategies, it will do the exact same thing.
Yeah. I was going to say it being a very creature heavy format, you're often going to be able to wipe the whole board. It's not going to be any. The only difference between that and Blasphemous Act will be the mana cost.
Mm-hmm. It is worth noting that budget decks, when you're playing against other budget decks, there do tend to be format differences compared to a lot of Commander decks. One of the things that's worth noting is you tend to have more creatures that are played, but fewer board wipes. Board wipes just tend to be a little more expensive. You can play some of the budget board wipes. For example, Cleansing Nova is relatively budget enough that you can play it. But a lot of the times, your creatures are also a little bit lower quality, so to speak. They end up needing to be pieces to other things that are going on. You also have fewer
board wipes available. Sorry, I was going to interject.
Right, go for it.
I was going to say, there are fewer board wipes available is like part of it, but there's still many alternatives like Time Wipe, Cleansing Nova. There is Day of Judgment's like $2. Flood of Tears is a very good one. There's fewer of them, but there are options.
Yeah, I think better to note even that for board wipes is they're less mana efficient. You're playing a lot of 5. I have seen some 7 mana board wipes being played as well.
In Garrick's Wake is 9.
Yeah, that's a 9.
And then Deadly Plague Wind's 9. So there's some expensive ones.
While your creatures may be a lower quality as well, you're able to exploit a board state pretty well, or you have to deal with a gummed up board state. So you get these very odd dynamics in the play patterns. They tend to be a little bit more grindy. You also just don't have tutors. Like,
good.
Flat out, you don't have tutors. You can play a couple of things here and there, but even like Diabolic Tutor is more than $1.
Is it really?
Well, I was going to argue that Diabolic Tutor's a bad card.
It is a bad card, but it's
also a lot of budget cards. So are a lot of budget cards though. Like a lot of budget cards sometimes are not the greatest compared to other cards in the format. And budget, I'm more lenient on the tutor thing because I think my main issue is tutoring out combo pieces is like leads to non-games. But if you're not really playing as much combo because it's harder to get those engine pieces, because combos generally are popular, which raises their price. So it evens out in a budget setting unless you're warping your deck around budget or potential combo cards. So fewer tutors like Mystical Teachings is a really good budget alternative. I guess if you want to run Diabolic Tutor and put that in your budget, there's that option. I don't know how much open the armory is. If you're playing a Voltron strategy, that one's really solid.
It's generally cheap enough.
Yeah, it got the reprint in Commander Legends, at least with the precon.
Open the armory. I see it as 75 cents.
64 cents according to TCG market price for both the Commander Legends and Shadows over Innistrad printing. Thank you, Internet. I love you. Yeah, so that is an option if you're taking every single card in a $50 budget deck as approximately 50 cents. Then it's a little bit over your typical budget for it, but other cards will be lower than that, so it evens out.
What's interesting to note is that like there aren't many budget alternatives that I can think of off the top of my head to certain kinds of tutors, like the green tutors, the green creature tutors specifically. Like you have your Green Sun Zenith and your Chords of Calling, which I think Chord of Calling is actually pretty cheap right now.
It's like $5 or $6.
Really? Well,
yeah, it's gone up.
I know it was cheaper than it used to be. I didn't know how cheap it got. but
Mhm.
there aren't really many alternatives to the green creature tutors, or obviously the black unconditional tutors. But things like equipment and auras do still have the tutors necessary that they can work within the restraints of the budget.
An alternative to like a green creature tutor, Neoform is 37 cents market price on TCG
Really?
Player. Neoform, I think, is a very vastly underplayed card. The card's bonkers.
What's the 3 mana elf that can tutor a creature with a fierce empath? No.
Fierce Impact.
Power,
That,
yeah, power 5 or a creature with CMC 5 or 6 or greater.
it's
Yeah.
6 or greater.
Yeah.
It's cheap. It's like 20
Mhm.
cents, 19 cents,
Yeah.
somewhere in that range. It's been
Right.
printed 8 times, so
It's a good
I
card.
would hope.
Yeah.
I mean,
You
if
have
you if
you
you
have
want
some
to play
options.
tutors, if you want to play tutors, there are options. They're much more restrained. They are not unconditional, like demonic tutor. Obviously, you're not playing demonic tutor, so those restrictions are a little bit more acceptable in my eyes, especially when you're on a budget. When you need to try to play the most powerful stuff in your budget,
They're generally more
right?
mana intensive as well.
Very true.
Everything in budget decks tend to be more mana intensive.
Speaking of mana, it's also harder to make your mana work.
Oh boy, budget mana bases. uh, Generally, whenever I'm building a budget mana base, I want to try to do something like get between 8 and 12 duels I can work with.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, if you're playing 3 colors and you only have 8 to 12 duels, you're going to be in trouble. Budget 5 color mana bases are pretty much impossible to do if you're really trying to keep up with what everyone's doing and you're not just comboing them. Your mana base is going to end up hurting you a lot.
You're playing mostly tap lands. That's what you can afford. You're playing the triomes, and also
Vivid
the
Land.
thriving lands are really good in these budget decks, especially 3 color, because you can choose what you need for what you need based on your hand.
The Vivid Lands are also acceptable.
Mhm.
Jason, is that the main I know you have a $100 Najila budget deck. Is that the reason why you went for a $100 budget, or was that just other reasons why you went for 100 on that deck?
For that deck, I just wanted to be able to play a little bit more powerful things in the deck.
Okay.
Plus, when you are working with a 5 color mana base, trying to do 5 color at $50 is really difficult to do, especially if you're not playing a lot of basic land tutors.
Mhm.
So I
And with
didn't.
that deck,
I
you're
didn't
trying
want
to
to
be
try.
aggressive.
Yeah,
You're
I'm
trying
trying to be
in the deck.
aggressive. It's a challenge, but
If I
it's
if
fun.
I recall, the Ur-Dragon precon had actually decent mana base for a 5 color budget-ish deck
Yeah.
because it's a precon. It had all the tri. I think it had every single tri land in it and all the vivid lands. So you can make it work definitely. It's just if you don't like tap lands, then it's not going to be that fun.
You're playing a turn behind everyone else, essentially.
Yeah.
That's going to matter a lot. Then, on top of that, you have to deal with mana rocks, which we had mentioned previously that some of the mana rocks are stupid expensive. But even things like, let's say you want to play with Strixhaven Stadium.
That's like $1, right?
Yeah, that's $1. You got to
Mm.
consider if you want it. Soul Ring being over $1, it's powerful enough that almost every time you're going to include it. But there have been budget decks where I have excluded Soul Ring because I could not do it on the budget.
Mhm.
And this is especially if you want to try to build around something that's slightly more expensive in your deck. For example, if your commander is a $10 commander, you end up having a whole lot less if you're considering that within the cost.
Mhm.
On that point about mana rocks, we've kind of, especially in the time I played Commander for the last 5 years now, on and off, especially more now, obviously. It used to be seen as okay to play the 3 mana rocks, whereas now it's very much, I don't want to say taboo because some of them are fine, but you want to max out on your 2 mana ramp. So if you're playing the mana rocks in budget, a lot of them are going to be your 3 mana ones, like Commander Sphere, the cycling ones. I think there were some cycling ones a couple of years ago.
The crystals
Yeah,
from
the crystals.
Ikoria.
You're
Darksteel Ingots one.
you're basically playing Manoliths with upside. Is just don't play Manolith. There are better ones.
Yeah, you're right. And another like difference in like budget compared to non-budget, like combat, as we mentioned, like creatures are like more important, but combat matters a whole lot more. If you like grind your combat, budget's probably where you want to be.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's about just trying to get the larger creature in play and bash through, which is fine too. Sometimes it's you can go wide, you can do some things, but it's also worth noting some of the fun cards you might want to play for those go wide strategies, like a Cathar's Crusade. That's $8.
Hmm. like even budget alternatives like Feldar Retreat. That's like $2. That is not easy to fit in your budget. You're going to be lacking other places if you're putting a $2 card in your $50 budget deck.
Will say, card I have been impressed with budget decks recently, and watching it in standard get played some. I believe it's Wedding Announcement.
Yes.
Yes, is that the white card that can make dudes or draw cards?
Yes, and then it transforms over into just being a glorious anthem.
An anthem.
I've actually been pretty impressed with it.
It's solid.
I tried to put that in my Felisa deck, and then the LGS I went to gave me Wedding Invitation, created a Wedding Announcement when I put the order in. I was like, this is not worth trying to fight them on that. So.
Is that the artifact that sacks itself and draws a card and like gives something lifelink? If it's
to be fair, but that's an egg.
A good card. That's a good card.
That's an egg.
You know, Jason and I like eggs, so
it's a pretty good card too.
I have given serious consideration to putting that into Brea since it's a self-sacrificing egg.
Mm-hmm.
I can see it.
And does it give unblockable or lifelink unconditionally?
I don't remember.
I think it's lifelink. It's of a vampire.
Yeah, lifelink if it's a vampire, and unblockable is unconditional.
And then another point I'd like to bring up is that you really can't do some strategies within a budget. Like the one that comes to my mind immediately is lands. Your lands cards are often going to be in other decks as well. You're going to like your fetch lands and stuff if you want multiple landfall triggers. Outside of the panoramas and your Terramorphic Expanse and Evolving Wilds, you're not going to be able to fit good fetch lands in a $50 budget. Maybe Fabled Passage, but even Fabled Passage,
that's a few dollars.
Yeah. What do y'all think are some other strategies that would be tough to do on a budget?
Tribal decks. Yeah. Tribal decks are really hard to do because if you're doing an established tribe, your best tribal pieces just aren't really available to you. I know, like, you can do goblins. Goblins and elves are the two tribes that you can probably do, but elves, you're going to have a hard time, especially if you want to try to do anything that involves the, like, heavy mana aspect of elves, because Heritage Druid's not cheap.
Nope.
So you're not playing that. Even Virtual Ranger's cheap enough that you can play that just fine. Quirion Ranger, you can do some stuff with.
Firewood Symbiote is a couple bucks, I think.
Like Prince of Titania is like $6.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I haven't checked on the Archdruid in a while, but
how much Archdruid?
Yeah, I imagine that card's still pretty close to $2.
It's actually been reprinted enough. It's about $1. It was like it got multiple core set printings, like from 2010 to 2013. Like those were all had those. Jumpstart had a reprint, multiple commander decks. So like, it's gotten reprinted enough. Lowest one's 82 cents. That's actually more reasonable than I thought.
What's also interesting to note with the tribal decks is that the best there's often one best commander that's going to be the best for the tribe. So like take mono green elves. I'd probably say Azuri is the best mono green elves commander. And I don't know, Azuri was a $4 or $5 card, right? At one point? It may be more now.
Yeah, it's $6 minimum.
So that's going to be tough to run as your commander. Or take zombies, for example. That's another really popular tribe. You can argue it. There are some different commanders, but I lean towards Wilhelm being the best right now.
Yeah.
And that's a couple bucks.
You can definitely do Wilhelm since it's cheap, but a lot of your support zombies, especially because of how much zombies, like, just once Wilhelm was printed, the price of every zombie just went up by like 40%.
Yes.
So like some of the things that you may want to play are just going to be out of reach because it's a popular commander when it's not budget.
Yep. I can speak from experience. Luckily I bought a lot of the zombies right before the spike. I got my Scarab God for like 30 and they spiked up to 45, 50. There was also Rot Hulk, which was the Game Nights promo. Not the show, but like there was the board game for Magic the Gathering, right? And Rot Hulk is a 7-mana Menace zombie that when it enters the battlefield for each opponent, you have return 1 zombie to the graveyard. So if you have 3 opponents, return 3 from your graveyard to the battlefield. And I got it for 15, and I remember seeing it went up to 40 in like 3 days. I was like, huh, I got that when I needed to.
It's still $26.
It plateaued a little bit. Yes.
Cameron indeed did a stonks.
I did.
He did a stonks. And did you get like a foil? But was it the Noxious and or the
So I was a goober and did not look at my TCG card very thoroughly. I got a foil zombie called Noxious Ghoul, which is actually one of the best zombies in the deck. When it reads, whenever it or another zombie enters the battlefield, all other non-zombie creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn. It's 5 mana, and with decayed zombies and a sack outlet, it's ridiculous. You can just control the board however you want. I got a foil version of that accidentally for 25. What is the foil version of it now, Ethan?
Are we talking about the Legions printing?
I have old border. I have the old border. I think, or I know.
Yeah. It's not the list, so yeah. $43.
Yeah, and it's since came down since it was like at 60 or 70 at one point, but I knew it wouldn't settle at that. And so
big stonks.
But though a lot of the even ones like Lord of the Undead, Ethan happened into 3 or 4 of those, and those are like
20
bucks. 20-30 bucks for a zombie lord that's okay, you know.
That card was like the only reason I had that set. I'm pretty sure it was uncommon in that set.
Yeah,
I got a collection, a bunch of commons on uncommons, like ranging back to like Mercadian Mass and like crap. What's the really bad set?
Homelands.
Homelands. I have a bunch of Homelands cards. I have a bunch of Homelands cards. Just like
I'm sorry.
Boxes. Hey, they're good proxy backs when I'm just like for the channel, so that's fine with me. And I have like 5 boxes. Like I have a lot of Lorwyn and Shards of Alara stuff, but I found 3 Lord of the Undeads in there, and I was like, okay, these are $20. I found a Mystical Tutor, a Cold Snap Precon deck, so I got a bunch of Snow Cover lands from there. So like I'm feeling good there. How much is Lord of the Undead now? Good lord, I'm thinking about it.
$30.
Yeah, $20. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
I mean,
Gang.
Going away from tribal, another strategy that's tough is mid-range, because mid-range is kind of just the best pile of cards in a color sometimes, and those are going to be expensive.
It kind of
Artifacts.
built into it. Oh god, artifacts is so hard to do well.
Sorry to interject.
No, you're
artifacts.
good. Mid-range doesn't take much talking about. It's literally just good cards.
Good cards. Artifacts. All the good cards cost way too much money. Right?
It's
if you're
super
trying
popular.
to play it, it's so popular.
I can liken it to taking it how tribal is expensive. You can kind of think of artifacts as a tribe, just because the best ones.
In a sense, yes, but also the fact that artifacts are so open-ended. Any artifact that can play most of them because they're all colorless. It's not like elves tribe cards are going to go towards elves. Artifact cards go towards every artifact deck, and they're expensive. How much KCI is like $30 now, right?
Oh, and even like an easier comparison, like Enchantress is much easier to do on a budget. But at the same time, if you want to play an Argothian Enchantress, you're shelling out big money.
It's like $40-$50, yeah. I know because I bought one.
Yeah.
There's some Enchantress pieces that are just ridiculously expensive, and even some of your mana accelerants are difficult to do. Like if you wanted to use a Utopia Sprawl, right? $4 or $5 for Utopia Sprawl right now, right?
It was like 15, and then it got reprinted in the Galea Precon and went down to 5.
That was a great reprint.
Yes,
it really
thank
was.
Goodness. You end up finding just these random cards that are suddenly expensive, and you just can't play them. So some strategies end up being difficult, but one thing that is consistent between a lot of these strategies that you'll find is when you're playing grindier gameplay, generic card advantage just matters a lot more. If you can double up your triggers like you're playing an Ishin deck, you're doing a much better spot. But Panharmonicon's $8, for example, so you really have to pick and choose these battles.
You have to. Yeah, often your commander, a lot of the generic card advantage commanders can kind of be a little more expensive, so you often have to add more card advantage to your deck. Like I'd say that Harmonize, even in a green deck without blue, would be in consideration in a green budget deck. It's not awful.
Yeah, it's I have found myself playing Read the Bones with slightly more consistency.
That's a good one.
Speaking on the grindy gameplay, spot removal. We've talked about how good creatures are. We've talked about just like how much card advantage and value is. Spot removal is so important, which is hard whenever Source Plowshares is $2. So you have to find alternatives to those, but you need to make sure you include that in your budget decks, or else you are just SOL.
Yeah, like in my Nymris deck, there is a lot of Doomblade-esque black removal spells that all have different stipulations, but do the same thing. Like, as I said, Doomblade. What's the counters one? Heartless something.
Heartless Summoning?
Heartless
Act.
Act.
Heartless Act.
Heartless Act.
Heartless Act.
And then they did reprint. They not reprint. They printed Infernal Grasp, which is just probably the best of the one in a black kill target thing. I mean, it's a buck or two, but I was able to fit it. And there's also ones like Go for the Throat. And I maxed out. I think I played 4 or 5 of those just because I knew like it's going to be so creature heavy. I want to be able to have all these spot removals.
Here's
Plus
Downfalls. How much is that one now?
Oh, it's super
It's an
cheap now.
uncommon. Yeah.
Yeah.
40 cents. Like, that's another good one.
You also have Blink of an Eye and Into the Royal. Those are really solid spot bounce cards.
One of the things that's worth noting is we mentioned that generic value matters. So you want to try to set up your own value engine while dissecting your opponents. So that spot removal, when you don't have access to great wraths in this format, so being able to surgically remove the one thing that is giving your opponent a lot of value is very important. But it also means you want to try to get catch-all removal, which is really hard to do because good catch-all removal costs more mana. Utter End, not a great card, but I played in a lot of budget decks.
Yep. It can get anything that you need. I think Generous Gift and Beast Within are still cheap enough.
Yeah.
So would you say that the flexibility of cards is more important? So, like, for instance, in non-budget decks, you're going to play Source Plowshares, Path to Exile, and other, like, more niche targeted removal. Do you think that in non-budget it is just much more important to, like, you already said this point. Why am I trying to say this again?
No, well, I think there's an important thing to point out, which is I will play a lot of things that are point removal that also overlap with other things the deck needs. For example, Bone Shards is something I will play very regularly because I need either a discard outlet or I need a sack outlet.
It's a good card.
On top of that, building a good budget deck is going to require significantly more research than I would do for a normal deck. And the really important thing is min-maxing effects becomes necessary for really optimizing these decks, and you have to min-max against the budget. So you may end up playing a suboptimal card just because it's within the budget, but it's still giving you the most value or bang for your buck.
So those resources we mentioned in the last episode of the best places to look at information and find information on decks, those are even more important to use those when you're trying to maximize your budget.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So now that we've kind of covered a lot of like the intricacies of building a budget deck and kind of the process, one question I've got, and it seems stupid at first, but I feel there's more to it. Is it easier to build a 2-color deck than a monocolor? Because obviously monocolor, you're gonna just throw 40 planes in a deck and some cards, and whereas the multicolor deck, you have to care about that mana base. But I feel like there's more nuance based on card choice.
It's not easy. I would generally say the 2-color decks are a little bit easier to build. You can make concessions in your mana base, which stinks, but the important thing is you can get a diversity of cards. So when you're stuck in a monocolor deck, you immediately start being overly reliant on staples. And staples tend to be more expensive. So you need to try to break away from using staples to build a higher quality deck.
It also helps with 2-color decks that your card pool effectively doubles. Obviously more because there's multicolor cards, and you have a lot more cards to choose from. Therefore, you can go sift through the weeds of the I don't want to say bad, but the cards that you wouldn't really see in non-budget tables, and be able to pick from both colors. So if you're blue-black, you have a lot more to go off than mono-blue.
Yeah, and to kind of build off that point, you're not, like, for instance, removal, right? You don't have to play the really, really crappy white removal if you're playing a black-white deck. You can choose the better black removal and the good white removal that's in your budget, and then build a harmonious removal package compared to, hey, I'm playing Secret Rendezvous as my card draw. You can avoid doing that if you're black-white compared to its natural consideration in a mono-white deck.
Ablation is fine, right, guys?
Moving on from your stupid point, God. So I mean, there's benefits obviously of monocolors. Your mana base is much more consistent and it's cheaper because basics we don't count. I guess we should have prefaced this earlier. Basics do not count in the deck price. Is that a fair? Is that understood?
Yeah, pretty much everyone has either you already have the basics, or they functionally cost nothing, and you can. In some cases, like where I worked for my LGS, we would legitimately just give you basics for free.
Yeah.
We just wanted to play the game.
So those don't cost anything. And if you find a deck that can function on lower budget, then like you might be able to fit in more staples, or more higher budget cards. I mean, again, if you consider every card being 50 cents and you're taking out 30 lands in that consideration, you might pay a few utility lands, but essentially you're putting in like an extra $15 worth of cards for quality cards you're putting into your mana base, or to your actual deck. So there's ups and downs to it.
I will say this: 3-color decks significantly harder to build than 2-color decks.
Oh, for sure.
100%.
The mana base really bites you. Now that we've noted these difficulties, do we make any changes to our process, for our general deck building process? Immediately, we know some commanders are just out of reach. You're not building Hazes on Tomorrow on your $50 budget. Sorry.
Unfortunately.
You're probably not building a Traxa either.
Yeah.
How much
Granted.
is a Traxa?
Like 20, 25 bucks.
All right.
You didn't know that?
You could maybe do it, but that'd be a really hard build.
Well,
It's a good challenge.
Fun.
Vivid lands. Let's go.
Well,
Yeah.
also, like, an Atraxa deck is either normally doing infect things or planeswalker things. Those things aren't cheap.
You gotta go into counters
Yeah.
on that one.
Yeah.
And of course, granted, some groups will choose to exclude the cost of the commander. So if you're doing that, this rule won't apply to you. But for us, we were factoring in the cost of the commander.
I personally like factoring the cost in. It just feels disingenuous to say, "Hey, here's a $50 card, and the rest of the deck's 50." That's a $100 budget deck, right? That to me, you need to factor in the cost of the commander.
Yeah, this is a relevant, different perspective. As content creators, there is some intention for us to give you something you can reasonably build.
Right.
If you're building for yourself and you don't care if anybody else tries to copy your build, then play by your own rules.
For us, we need to follow that restriction that we place upon ourselves because one is consistency. We don't want to be hypocritical on that. And also, if we're trying to show you, hey, these decks are accessible on a budget, go for it. We still need to do a $25 budget deck because I've got a list ready for that.
You do?
That one's hard.
Lucky?
Yeah,
That sounds fun.
I was working on it, and Jason said, "Oh wait, you have 10 cards left, and you're still $5, or you're at $20. Let's make a $25 budget deck." And I was like,
Yeah.
Cool.
Very cool.
I'm waiting to play Glissa. I'm still ready to play
Oh,
Glissa.
it's Glissa. That's fun.
Oh yeah, I can't
Is
wait.
it an eggs deck?
No. So
Some
kind of,
artifacts and sacrifice involved.
I'm gonna try
Leave
to
it there.
transition to another thing about like how like other things. When I do budget decks, that's my time to shine with bulk cards that are garbage that I want to make work. So for instance, with the Glissa deck, I made it a Metalwork Colossus deck. I'm trying to remember. I think it might be a construct. So I put like Scrapyard Recombiner in so I could tutor it out. Don't quote me on that. It's been like a month or two since I built this
That
deck.
sounds right.
It does sound right. I think I remember seeing it.
Yeah. So like I built that deck to essentially say, cool, I want to find Metalwork Colossus and use its sacrifice from the graveyard ability to get things back and then be able to play it for cheap or free and then maybe sack it, do some shenanigans and get Glissa's death triggers on opponent stuff to get back the artifacts I'm sacrificing. So making an engine with this. So that's how generally I get my inspiration. Like I want to find a really crappy card and make it cool. My main goal, which is really hard because artifacts, as we said earlier, is hard to do on a budget. But let's say you can buy a lot of crappy artifacts to just draw you a card, and it works. But I want to make Pia's Revolution work. I want to make that card work so bad.
Glissa doesn't make crappy artifacts work. Glissa makes god-awful, terrible artifacts work.
Yeah.
And I can't make.
You just want to live in a world where Ethan just wants to live in a world where Metalwork Colossus is a good card.
I got the secret layer. I want to play my pretty one.
I got it too. It
totally was an inspiration for building that deck partially. It was like, I'm getting a pretty one in the mail. I want to use it.
No, that's really cool.
So, like, that's kind of my mindset going into building budget decks. Do you guys, like, have something particularly with, like, your deck building process that, like, with budget decks particularly?
There's a really interesting thing I've noted. I mentioned before that sometimes I'm really good at making cuts in decks before I get to it. Sometimes I'll be under on the number of cards. Budget decks, it's the opposite. Because you have to consider the min-maxing component of the cost to value ratio that's going on here. I have a tendency to have 160 cards in the deck, and I just start making cuts from there because I just have to balance out the budget.
Yeah, I very much agree with Jason. I'm always bad about adding too many cards, and in a budget scenario, you get to see all these cards that you don't normally get to play with. So you get your eyes light up and you're excited, like, oh, I get to play. In Ethan's case, Metalwork Colossus. So I have tougher time cutting cards than Jason does.
I generally still I feel like I'm under because I'm always conscious of the budgets. Like, okay, maybe put that in the considering board, and if I can fit it in the budget, then I'll put it in. But generally, I don't try to get over 100 because then it's like, then at the point you're choosing your favorite kids, and I don't like that feeling.
Yeah.
So, and also like another consideration with budget deck building is like with me, I want to use the crappy cards I already own. I will usually think that it's more relevant for me to use the cards I already own. If I'm trying to make things cheap, I want to make it as cheap as possible for myself and use those kind of diamonds in the rough that I've collected and I want to use.
That said, Skyfall and EDH rec. Oh, we are jamming those resources so much harder than we do normally.
Still part of the Holy Trinity.
It's still part of the Holy Trinity. It's incredible how much more time I end up spending building a budget deck than building a non-budget deck.
If I'm making Metalwork Colossus work, I need all the resources I can to make that thing work. There's a question. You're shaking your head. Do you not like my Metalwork Colossus standing?
No, I like it.
Like, so I was gonna build I think Jason said he did this one day either, but I was gonna build a Silas, Ren, Ghost of Ramirez de Pietro deck potentially for a budget deck. And I literally went through. I did the Gatherer at the time, but I've started using Scryfall since because it's better. But literally any card that says sacrifice an artifact, I looked through every single card that says sacrifice itself or an artifact to see if it would have been good in that deck.
You know something really funny recently?
What?
So Mark Rosewater on his Tumblr Blogatog was responding to somebody, and when he posted a link to a card, he used Scryfall instead of using Gatherer.
That's hilarious.
Wow.
It's just Scryfall's the de facto go-to card database right now.
So Jason, like, I always usually go with cards in my collection more so if when I'm building budget decks or sometimes decks in general, but usually budget decks I kind of go with things I own. Are you kind of the same mindset, Cameron? Do you usually go with the cards you own, or are you more likely to spend more money because it is a cheaper card?
I personally don't mind spending the money if it's like a $25-$50 budget. Even though that I may not get to use them again, it being not necessarily a staple, I'm not too worried about it. And it also kind of motivates me or incentivizes me to use those cards again. Like, if they are those diamonds in the rough and seeing where I can make them work, that's really cool.
So, this is a little bit weird. Despite the fact that it's so cheap and I'm building a deck, I often find that cards I own and not having to buy the cards matters more to me than it does normally. And the main reason for that being that with budget decks, I don't intend to keep them around for forever. And because I don't intend to keep them around for forever, many of these budget cards are not worth including in full price decks. So getting the chance to play with the ones that I have right now is slightly worth the effort more. That said, if it's more expensive or a staple card, I care less about the price. Just because, okay, I'll play it in other decks. So, if I'm building something that's a $25 deck, I care a lot about the cards I end up picking up because I know I'm never going to use it anywhere else. But at a $50 deck, I care some, and $100 decks, generally there's enough staples in there that I don't care. I'll just pick it up because I'll use it elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. I align more with Jason's mindset. Mostly because Metalwork Colossus is a junk bolt card I own and I like to use it. So now we've kind of talked about our process in a general sense and my love for Metalwork Colossus. I wanted to personally go over a few of the decks that we played on the channel and the other decks we have brewed recently for budget decks. But we'll mention the ones that you guys have seen theoretically so far. If you have watched our video, if not, please check it out on our channel, WrinklyBrainEDH, if you don't know what that is somehow. So mentioning first,
sorry, I'm just getting. How did I get here?
Yeah, they're already here.
Just in case it was a fever dream at 3 a.m, YouTube autoplay, we're on the SmoothBrainEDH channel.
It can happen. Everyone's been there.
I have been there a lot recently. I'm depressed. Anyway. So the deck I've been telling Logan to build for at least a year now has been Sir Konrad because he likes to cause pain and torment to everybody, and he plays primarily black decks. So it was a win-win, and he didn't listen to me. And then he said, "Oh, Sir Konrad on our budget," and he played it the one time. He said, "Oh, this deck's great." No shit, Sherlock.
Yeah, I don't know if you were watching that game that intensely, Ethan, where he
I
popped
was
off.
too depressed after the mana tithe. At the time, I literally sat in the living room and I just played Sudoku on my phone. I was like, I'm cooling down a little bit.
It's still funny. I'm still gonna laugh at it.
I watched the video, obviously. I did the intro for the video. I watched the video before it went up. That deck popped off super hard.
Yes, oh my god. Sitting there, like, waiting. Mind Crank in that deck is absurd. It's
No way.
absurd. And I was playing with I was a control deck that ran like 8-10 creatures or whatever. There was Tayam or Tayam? How do you say that? Tayam, which is like 30 creatures or something, and then Goro-Goro, which had like 20. So I died first because one, they were attacking me due to me in the previous game, everybody hating me, and two,
I didn't hate you. You caused me pain, but I didn't hate you.
You didn't. I do appreciate that. And two, I don't know. It was just really cool, and it was bad. Like I died so fast.
Like, so like, I helped with building this one. I don't remember if Minecrank was in there before I recommended it. I don't think it was, so sorry. But
so it's your fault, is what I'm kidding.
Yes.
But
let me DC you from the Discord server. I will right now.
the one thing that I was noticing about that deck that always seemed a little rough to me was like some of its self-mill was a little weak. It always seemed like the pieces were not quite working together in a way that would cause the deck to be able to be as explosive as it ended up being. I was blown away by how effective it was. Of course, Minecrank stole the show, but the rest of the deck was just functioning extremely well. And Sir Konrad having a redundant effect in the deck in Dreadhound also was something that was like, that's something you got to look forward to.
I had to counter that Dreadhound because I didn't want 2 of those effects.
Yeah.
I asked Logan, what does it do? Oh, it's Sir Konrad, but on a different creature. I said, no thanks. We don't need to.
No, thank you, sir. I mean, to also mention EDH Rec, they did upping the average on this video or on that commander. I watched a while ago, and that deck can be really, really powerful on a budget. So when I seen that commander, I was like, I'm in the other pod. Not actually. Logan played out the pods. I just got lucky. But that deck's extremely powerful, and he's going to build that on a non-budget here soon because he fell in love with it after playing it the one time. And I totally can't wait, guys.
He waxes poetically about it all the time. Anytime it's Magic related now, it seems like Logan's like, yeah, this Sir Konrad deck, we got to make it better. I was like, it's already good. I'm like, there ain't much more you need.
Let him have his thing.
Maybe let him play the budget deck against some other non-budget decks. Like, I do that with Najeela all the time. Granted, $50 more on the budget, but
right.
So we mentioned Tayam and during that whole description about Sir Konrad. It's another graveyard deck, so Logan was very, very pleased to see that. This boy, Matt, I love him to death, but he put Ashdon's Altar in. He fit in that card somehow. And the deck was still powerful. It still won that game, right? It ended up winning that game. And after
he won with Sir Konrad.
Yeah, he did win with Sir Konrad. You're right. So even with his combo exiled, he still managed to win because Tayam is stupid.
Tayam's very good.
I never realized there was any permanent at first. I just figured, it's a creature because it counters on creatures. No, it's just permanent.
Right. Meta value 3 or less, but
I also didn't realize that like it gave everything vigilance counters. Yeah. So don't you have to remove 3 counters from among creatures you control?
3 of any counters.
That's still not that hard of a stipulation in that deck.
I would say the Wall of Roots interaction. I think we saw that during that game, right? But having since played against this Tayam deck, Wall of Roots interactions with Tayam have really impressed me. In general, Tayam has just been surprising in like every facet.
Mm-hmm.
The card's bonkers.
That's an underappreciated commander for sure.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So if we want to see it pop off, we have gameplay of that too. The other decks on the table were obviously Cameron's Nymris, which caused me many nights of pain.
I mean, Nymris is Nymris. We kind of talked about it. I do want to mention Chandler's Goro-Goro. That deck was sick. He was making dragons left and right. Like, he had the Battle Mage's Bracers, I believe, is the card. And he was making 2 5/5s every attack. That's really good.
I was surprised by the power of it, honestly. Like, he had a decent draw, and he got a lot of ramp off the Explorer Scope. But, like, Goro-Goro just making a 5/5 every turn is not anything to scoff at, especially in a budget situation.
Yeah, and in a budget environment in particular, I think Goro-Goro is great. I'm not sure if it's going to change my assessment on it for Xur scale stuff, but I have more respect for what it's doing now.
Yeah.
Also, just a haste enabler on our commander's not bad. Like there's respect for that enough. So those are the 4 decks we saw in the video, but obviously I was on the video, and I actually had 2 lists ready. I originally with Jason brewed Jadzi, Oracle of Apicaros, Acavios.
Jadzi.
Yeah, Jadzi.
Jadzi.
The 8 mana mythic from Strixhaven that had the 4 mana sorcerer on the backside. I was told I was not allowed to play said Jadzi deck from our editor because they are sick and tired of me bringing Spellslinger decks.
Rionia.
Trust me, I understand. I did a video a few weeks back that got posted. That was the 20-minute turn for me where everyone went up and got pizza while I continued to storm off and then kill Cody on his upkeep. I get it. I was very sad because this deck was bonkers. Goldfishing, it was like a turn, just getting to go gush into Journey to the Oracle and to just dump my lands into play and then play. It was so dumb. Sprouting Vines, just Storm Triggers with Jadzi on every copy and cast triggering.
Yeah, the Jadzi interactions with random storm cards were insane, and the amount of times we goldfished that deck and we were getting pretty consistent storm kills turn 6, turn 7, right?
Oh lord.
And budget, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, and also
power casual, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, it's not bad. The Jadzi deck really impressed me, but also the thing that I found hilarious about what we did with that is when we were building, we were trying to figure out how do we fix this mana base, and we just said fuck it, basics.
It was 22 forests, 22 islands, and it worked like a charm because Jadzi, like you're base green, so as long as you have like a forest and you're finding your ramp to find your blue sources, and if you find only blue, you're playing a lot of card draw spells. Like you're playing, I think we fit Ponder in. We had like Opt and Brainstorm and stuff like that. So like we had ways to draw cards to find the colors of mana we were missing. So instead of playing fixing, we play card draw, and we played extra fixing on top of that. Because even if you're playing your ramp spells, they still trigger Jadzi to potentially find you another spell or find you another land, which then pays for another Jadzi trigger down the line. It just snowballs so fast.
Yeah, realistically in our goldfishing, we did like 4 or 5 games of goldfishing with this.
The night we built it, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we had one time where we fizzled. Like once we started,
I don't even know if we did.
Yeah, maybe once we fizzled, or we just took a value turn.
That was a value turn.
Yeah, so like Jadzi was insane, and like just random ramp spells becoming anything off the top potentially is incredibly powerful, and the just raw card advantage you're getting from Jadzi was insane. Also, Ethan did have to convince me to include Brain Freeze in this deck.
Yeah,
because I was looking at it like, that's $2. I don't know if we can fit $2 win.
No, it was like $5 or $6. I thought.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it was an actual consideration because it was a few bucks, but he didn't think the storm count got up that high. It got up that high.
Yeah, no, we were straight up killing people with the Brain Freeze
on like turn 6 or 7.
Yeah,
and then also off the storm triggers, like you're going to get more Jadzi triggers. Also, don't forget the like Root Awakening and Early Harvest. I believe the 2 cards that untap all your basic lands. Those are pretty cheap.
Yeah.
So you say, cool, I'll just play like a Boundless Realms and then Root Awakening, untap all my lands that I just got out. Cameron keeps on shaking his head. He doesn't like
ridiculous.
This. I'm sorry, I can't play Sunforge in the deck. If I played Sunforge, would you like it more?
Sunforger is good, clean magic. And
playing all your lanes out of your deck in one turn isn't?
Did Richard Garfield intend that? But
Yeah, kinda.
Electro Field intend
Fastball's a card.
Fastball's a see. Cameron, you convinced yourself. Good job. Proud of you.
No, I'm not convinced yet.
So again, that deck wasn't shown on the channel yet. I'm giving the editor a break for a little bit before I bring that one on.
I want to see it.
I want to see the actual deck I did end up bringing, which I mentioned earlier, was Felisa Fenrir Silverquill, which that one I feel like needs some work. Personally, I don't think I included enough ramp for my personal taste because I just felt like I was always like a turn behind on everyone else's like game plan. It's an Orzhov deck, so it was very mana intensive to me. There were some cards that were like 5 mana, 6 mana. Again, you're feeling the budget restrictions on that one. Every time I played Felisa and I started to get a board, targeted removal shut me down, and then no one shut down Cameron's Nymris. So
I had a Hullbreaker Horror, so anytime I was casting a removal spell or a counter spell, I would just bounce the board. And...
like my Felisa. I cast Felisa from my hand about 8 times that game.
Jesus.
Yeah, it was miserable.
I was looking for a way to end the game, and I eventually found it. Then we found out that the recording was shot.
I looked up, was like, oh, the red blinking light's not blinking red right now, and we just said, oh, that's not good.
Neat.
So,
also, we haven't quite addressed this as much. As resident person who built a lot of budget decks, I build bad decks at times. Sometimes your strategies don't work out, or they just do not work the way you want them to. My shining example of complete and utter dog shit failure, it was my Agar list.
Oh, is that the wizard or the giant
wizard
guy?
Oh,
yeah, once you deal excess damage.
Is that card good?
No.
Okay, I saw it and thought it was interesting, but then I was like, this has to be bad.
So sometimes you just run into a weakness to the commander, which is in the case of Agar, your removal efficiency is quite bad.
Mm-hmm.
Your Flame Slash is the single best removal spell in your deck. And if you want to kill a 4 toughness thing, that doesn't feel like you're going to kill it, sure, but you're not getting the card that you need.
Roast.
And Roast is in the deck. It's a great card in the deck. Chain Reaction and Blasphemous Act were both in that deck as well because you needed that.
Oh my god, that's sick! I want to do that.
But your deck doesn't do anything until you draw those, and Agar is now dead.
But you drew a lot of cards off Blasphemous Act.
Yeah, I mean that's great and all. How are you dealing with a resolved enchantment?
Don't worry about it. You're in red-blue. That's someone else's job.
And you're just how you winning the game ends up being like, oh, here, let me get my stuffy doll into play and try to Blasphemous Act it, and that's hard to do.
Oh, it's so cool.
You don't want to rush contra somebody?
Or let me just try to beat someone with a Quakebringer because that's the quality of giants I'm working with.
Yeah, that's a little rough.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that deck just it can work okay, but no, it compared to the things that compared to this Sir Konrad deck, this Tayam deck, even how Goro-Goro was functioning, right?
And
that deck just isn't doing nothing in that metagame. It's not doing anything. And Jadzi just sits above all of this shit and is ready to just rail you. So
yeah.
Oh, I really wish I had brought that, but again, I gave our editor a break.
I still want to see it in play because I want to see how it deals with point removal.
Not very well. It's literally like you run. How many creatures did we run? It was like 2. It was like Jadzi, Quandrix Apprentice. Did we run any other creatures?
We put a Boreal Grazer in there, right?
I don't think we put a Boreal Grazer in.
Damn, we didn't give people hugs.
No hugs. We did not
give
sloth hugs.
Well, I'll have to look at it later. I might have to. I think we should include these deck lists we're talking about in the description for people to see.
Yeah.
So, if future me, when you're editing this, please do that. And then, budget decks are fun. In summation, budget decks are fun.
Very.
Absolutely. Fantastic. And also a relatively even playing field going into it.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, Jadzi versus Agar happens, but
I mean, the Rule 0 discussion doesn't have to happen as much just because it's like you're all within. Important. Oh, it's very important, but it's still you're all within $25. You're all under $25. How dumb can you get?
Yeah,
Magic is a dumb game, and you can get pretty dumb theoretically, but it's much harder to get there. I think the budget helps take out some of the dumb stuff. And if you're just wanting like a chill game to play, like I know a lot of people play Commander just to chill, sit back, and like have a drink and talk while you're doing something. For a lot of people, it's like a board game, right? Budget, I feel like leans more into that accessibility there, because when you're playing like a non-budget restricted, you have a lot more powerful cards that can just take over the game and snowball. You don't get near as much of that in a budget setting, to where you can kind of have a back and forth gameplay. That's just like that's my interpretation of it, and I could be wrong, but my experience, that's what it feels like.
No, I completely agree with it. It's playing budget games feels oftentimes like playing more concentrated precons,
Yes.
which, precon gameplay, not my absolute favorite thing to do, but it is something that I find enjoyable to do, that once a year or twice a year kind of thing. And budget decks, though, is something that I can do way more often, just because it's much more wide open than precons.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that about wraps us up today. Thank you again for listening to another episode of the Wrinkly Brain podcast. Just a reminder, we now have a public Discord, and the link to that is in our description. Come talk to us about deck building, magic, random nonsense, memeing on us, bogging Ethan, etc. If you prefer social media, we're active on Twitter now, and our boomer Jason is learning Instagram, so those links are also in the description. Hope you all enjoyed the latest gameplay video. We have another exciting video coming out this week, so please do not miss it. Hope you all check it out. This is Ethan, Jason, and Cameron signing out.